Welcome in to the DNVR Fantasy Podcast. Justin, how are you doing, my man?
Doing good, man. I lost this week, which snapped a 5-game winning streak, but a lot of bye weeks to deal with last week, which was I think a problem for a lot of people really last week and this week. So, it is what it is. I'm excited to talk about streaming options. I wish I would have talked them through with you before last week. Callaway, Saints receiver, let me down big time. I was down 20 going into that Monday night game. I knew it was a long shot, but he got like 2 points. Definitely
He's a
not what I
feast
was
or
looking
famine
for.
guy. I know super producer Kale, who actually you look like you're coming to us from a mountain cabin, which is really nice. And you're dressed like it too, which I love. But you famously this season, the guy who's really dominating on his fantasy teams, though not that anyone cares. My dynasty squads are starting to make a comeback. You famously had to just punt on the week. You had so many buys.
I had so many buys. I had at least 5 buys from starters in all of my leagues. So like it wasn't even worth trying and make something work and get a roster together because it was just like I'm going to lose. I'm going to drop someone I don't want to drop in order to do this. And so I just punted and said, I'm probably going to make the playoffs anyway. Let's just try and keep my roster together.
Sometimes it's the best way to go, especially with like defense, kicker sometimes, but the goalie in my fantasy hockey team, you might want to avoid the minus with the crappy scrap heap pickup on the waiver wire. But we won't go too long on that because better week, not a ton of waiver stuff to talk about, though we'll hit on that because we always got to keep those teams, polished up, especially in dynasties. I don't care how bad your team is. Got to stay on that waiver wire. You got to pick up those guys who will pan out for you long term if you just stay true and you stay smart. But really, what's going on right now, the big story in fantasy football is what Derrick Henry is on pace for doing. From our headline, you could have probably guessed it. Justin, you suggested this topic, and we actually had a ton of fun, even off air, getting into all the greatest running back seasons of all time. So I'll kind of kick this to you to set the stage.
Yeah, man. I mean, just when you look at the production that Derrick Henry has put up over the last couple of years, it's absolutely insane. Dre shared a tweet from CBS. How dominant has Derrick Henry been? Most rushing yards over a 40-game stretch in NFL history. Jim Brown, O.J. Simpson, Terrell Davis, Eric Dickerson, all below what Derrick Henry has done from 2018 through present. And I mean, the year's not even over yet. So it's just crazy to see what he's done at such a high volume. And I mean, Kale talked about it preseason after getting so many touches these last couple of years. It wouldn't have been shocking if he would have had a down year, but he just kind of has no signs of slowing down. And at least in the last 5 to 10 years, he's by far the best fantasy running back in football and kind of a throwback running back. It's fun to watch.
Now, controversial you saying that because technically speaking in PPR, which is what most people play, Christian McCaffrey has 2 of the top 10 fantasy football seasons of all time. And, Kamara and Dalvin Cook were ahead of Derrick Henry. That's what's interesting here is in some ways, Henry is born in a different era of fantasy football where he's underappreciated because, for example, he's averaging 26.6 points per game in PPR leagues and 24.1 in non-PPR leagues. And the 24.1 would have him on pace to have the second greatest non-PPR season of all time for a fantasy football running back.
I think the difference with Henry is the totality, though, right? I mean, it's individual seasons. McCaffrey, Kamara, some of these guys have put up better numbers where you could be like, yeah, I would rather have, 2015 McCaffrey or 2016 McCaffrey, whatever it was, where he had that absurd year. But has anybody been as consistent over this 4-year stretch? Not really. I mean, especially when you factor in the injuries and, Zeke's had high moments, but he's been up and down. Kamara's had to deal with injuries. McCaffrey can't stay on the field of late. I get that some of those guys are probably a little bit more valuable in PPR when they're at their peak. But there is something about just having a guy that every week is probably going to get you 20 points at least.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, for 40 games, that's the thing about running backs and like why it's so hard. I know you've drafted him for several years now, but you are always concerned, when is the drop-off coming? When's the drop-off coming around the corner? Statistically speaking, you would have assumed, especially for big guys, he reminds me so much of like Jamal Lewis or Larry Johnson, Steven Jackson, who's on this list of top 100 greatest running back seasons. He's in the top 10. And you assume a drop-off is going to come, but he's just maintaining at an insane level.
I mean, when you look at the history of all the guys who have had 2,000-yard seasons, there's like a big drop-off.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's just not right now. He's on pace, even with the 17, even if we had a 16-game season, not a 17-game season, to be over 2,000 yards again. That just doesn't really happen. I don't know what to say about Derrick Henry anymore. There's no historical precedence for this, so we're all just kind of like saying like, well, he was supposed to slow down a long time ago and he's not, so I guess we're just going to keep watching this.
I think the historical precedence is Jim Brown. And obviously like before my time, and those guys aren't even once in a generation, once an era. They're like literally once every 15 years. I mean, he is that freakish in like, yeah, he's just the D end who's faster than everyone. So you're kind of screwed. You're not going to stop him ever.
When he gets to the next level and you see there's a moment where Derrick Henry, because he hits the hole so fast, but then he has this next level where he's like, all right, I'm going to get past the safety real quick. And you see him just outrunning defensive backs. It's not fair. People that are that big should not be able to move the way he does. He's not from this planet, and he's so much fun to watch. He's throwing touchdowns now. I can't believe I haven't seen somebody edit that touchdown pass with a Boobie Miles scene from Friday Night Lights where his uncle's like, and he can pass. That was amazing. Cost me my bet. Dre was talking trash on the bets pod, but that's okay.
Yeah. To your point about his speed when you get to the second level and his ability to outrun DBs, that 76-yard touchdown run against the Bills, people want to talk about how good the blocking was and how anyone could have made that touchdown run. And there's a point that I just feel like people are missing there. When you watch Micah Hyde, who's a really good, really solid NFL starting safety, and he's really good about being a last line of defense, and he knows his angles really, really well when he cuts to make those tackles. And when you watch that 74-yard, or maybe it was a 76-yard touchdown run, you watch Micah Hyde come in and take the angle he's supposed to be using, but Derrick Henry hits that second level speed right as that angle is cutting in, and it causes Micah Hyde to just be a half second too late. It allows Derrick Henry to get by him and not get wrapped up on those legs, plus just how high his steps are when they're so fast. And so that's a move only Derrick Henry can make. Even a really smart veteran safety like Micah Hyde coming in there, who usually makes those really smart tackles. Yes, was the blocking awesome on that play, but that's just an example of the type of moves he can make that nobody else can at his position. So what we're watching is Derrick Henry's a little bit of a feast or famine. He's not even quite like a Nick Chubb, who you really dependably feel like he's going to get 5 to 6 yards every time you give him the ball. You don't necessarily feel like that with Derrick Henry. But what you can count on is for every 30 carries you give him, one of them's going to go for 75. And that's insane.
No, he really is. He has a way of squaring himself up, and just every single step has such purpose and kind of power to carry his momentum, which is close to unprecedented for a big guy, or at least in rare air, like guys on that list, the OJs and the Jim Browns of the world.
He just wears on you. I mean, the thing is, like, early, and defenses are obviously stacking the box against him because you're trying to do anything that you can, put some weight in there. You need speed too, so it's kind of a contradiction. It's, what do? Do you stack the box and hope that you can just clog things up enough, or and worry that he goes around the outside? I mean, we were talking about before, they're getting him involved a little bit in some of those swing passes and quick screens and stuff. I mean, if he could just even become a guy that gets like 4 catches a game, 25 receiving yards on top of what he already does, he's going to be borderline unstoppable. I mean, he pretty much is already.
Well, and you wonder why that isn't happening. And I would almost compare it to Adrian Peterson, a guy who, for guys our age is one of the GOATs you think of when you think of fantasy running backs, but he's somehow not in this top 20, which is heavily skewed towards PPR guys, but it's surprising. And I think in some ways they're really comparable. And I remember AP, it must have been that season. It's his 2000 rushing season, and he also has 40 receptions. I think that must have been under Norv, where they finally give him 40 catches. And what a difference that made. And there was always talk of like, well, they can do that again. And they never quite did. And yeah, you think because as Kale described it, he's a feast or famine runner because he's such a big guy. I think sometimes it's, it's just harder to make quick cuts, and it's harder to just have that acceleration out of nowhere. So why not get him in space? Why not with a little head of steam on a screen or, a quick toss or what have you, and try to get him a little more quick touches in the passing game?
I mean, he doesn't have great hands. That's the thing, is even when you watch him try and make catches, it kind of looks like he's trying to catch, like, I don't know, a bowling ball or something big. Like you see him like settle and go, huh, every time he's catching the ball, which is why they sort of try and disguise that in screens, places where they're getting him the ball, where there's nobody around him. But when they do that, it's effective. I'm not trying to have him make a catch out in space where he has 3 defenders around him. That's not how I'm going to use Derrick Henry. He's probably going to drop the ball. But if I can get him a screen, absolutely.
It's a big guy, little ball. He's got to snatch it out of the air.
Like, I don't know. He just looks, maybe it's a stupid point, but he looks funny when he catches the ball.
No, he does. He's not like the most natural pass catcher in the world. And it's definitely something he's had to improve as he's gotten in the league. Like, he didn't do it much at Bama because they didn't have to. It was just stretch runs between the tackles. I like that Dre brought up the quick toss, though, because while the Vikings didn't ever really consistently get AP those catches, that was kind of the way that they got him in space, was just those quick tosses. I remember every single game, it felt like there were 3 or 4 that Peterson was just going to bust, on the right side for like 15 to 20 yards or, hit the home run because he's bigger than you. He's stronger than you. And when he gets going in open space, he's just got so much momentum. He's hard to bring down. Let's talk about it though. Let's talk about who our like favorite fantasy running backs of all time are, because that was kind of the premise for this debate. We've set it up. We've mentioned a lot of the guys that are probably going to come up in this, and I don't know, how do we want to do it? Do we just want to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, go one at a time?
I can actually just start where you just left off, because that AP season is sort of what got me into fantasy football in the first place. It was the first year I did it with my dad. There's a fantasy football league that my neighborhood, like all the dads do, and my dad let me sort of co-manage his team with him that year. And we had Adrian Peterson, and it was just like such a blast on Sundays watching him do crazy things every Sunday. And we won our league that year. And because of that, there was the first non-Broncos football jersey I ever got was an Adrian Peterson jersey after that year. And that was like, I don't know, I'll always remember that. That's probably going to be number 1 for me, just because of the memory it has and sort of getting me into fantasy football. It's the fun times.
Can we talk about his run from 2007 through basically 2015 is absurd. He had 10 plus rushing touchdowns every single one of those seasons, other than the one where he got hurt week 1 and was out for the rest of the year. I mean, that's just insane. On top of that, went for 1,200 plus 6, 7 times. 1,300 plus like 5 times. He was the most exciting player, I think, in the NFL for a couple years, just in terms of like, it could be a random garbage game, the Vikings, versus a bad Bears or something, but it's like, well, at least I get to watch Adrian Peterson for 4 quarters.
Yeah.
That's for sure. The season we were really drooling over before getting on was the 2006 LaDainian Tomlinson season, which really is kind of the Mendoza line for the greatest season of all time in fantasy, and also the greatest like standard, because even though he has 56 receptions, 500 receiving yards in that year, he's still the only non PPR season over 400 points. Derrick Henry's on pace right now to do that, but that's assuming he keeps this pace up for 17 games, which of course wasn't the case for LT back in the day. So that's insane. And, it was slightly before me, but obviously the TD season in 98, Terrell Davis going over 2,000 yards, and that still remains the 5th highest scoring fantasy season in standard leagues all time. And it's a top 5. We were talking off air. That is LT, Priest Holmes, TD's on there, and then you have Marshall Faulk. It's a lot of AFC West. And then Christian McCaffrey's 2nd highest scoring fantasy football season all time, a Colorado kid. Pretty cool as well.
That's wild.
Yeah,
Is Adrian Peterson? He's in my top 5 as well. Is he on your list as well, Dre?
LT, Marshall Faulk for sure, and Terrell Davis have to be in my top 3. Yeah. Peterson would definitely sneak into one of those spots, 4 or 5. I mean, it's undeniable. I love the guy. I loved him. I mean, that freshman season at Oklahoma, something it still pops into my head all the time. He was different. I mean, similar to Derrick Henry, he was just different. And I think even though there's been a lot of running back value nonsense talk on football Twitter from time to time, there's something about the position and the true greats that just inspire an awe that is unique to that position, that can't really be matched. And whether it's the power of Derrick Henry or Adrian Peterson, who felt like had those big ass pads and was just like bouncing guys off his knees, man, it's incredible. And I love fantasy football that it can still exalt and allow us to appreciate that. I'm going to take a quick break, let you guys get your final thoughts out, and then we will get set for the upcoming week. Start sit debates, couple waiver wire pickups. Producer Kale's got us set with some streaming options, as he will do from time to time. But until then, I don't know what you're doing right now if you haven't gotten on the DraftKings Sportsbook app, the #1 sportsbook in all the land, a place I go often to get fantasy advice, see what the odds are, what the props are set. In fact, that would be a nice way to settle some of these start-sit debates that I have going in my head right now. It's a tremendous resource. It's also a tremendous place to bet money on sports and get big wins. This week, bet $5 on any football market, NFL market, and win $200 just like that for new users. They'll also match that deposit up to $1,000. Use code DNVR to get that. All sorts of great deals on the NFL, football, all around. So download that DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code DNVR and get in on all the fun. Must be 21 or older, Colorado only. New customers only. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-522-4700. Close me out, Justin, on Derrick Henry, and we'll get into. You can start us off with start sit.
Yeah, just with this list that I put together, obviously, I mean, you mentioned Terrell Davis, the 2,000-yard season. For any Broncos fan, I think that's going to be in there. But I was 3 years old, so I wasn't playing fantasy football yet at that time. I went a little bit more subjective with mine, so I'll just throw a couple guys out. Derrick Henry is my favorite fantasy running back of all time. Part of that is just because I've had him this entire dominant run, so it's been a lot of fun each and every week to have that to depend on. Number 2, I had LT. Number 3, Sean Alexander. 2001 to 2005 was as good as basically any running back in terms of like a 3-4 year stretch. Double-digit touchdowns, was electric. It's unfortunate that injuries cut his career short. I got Adrian Peterson at 4. And 5, Clinton Portis, 2002 to 2007. He was the player that got me into fantasy football. And that 6-touchdown game, I was in the 3rd grade against Kansas City. That was how I wrapped up my season, got me all into it. It was a lot of fun. Obviously, he got traded, which was a bummer. But yeah, I think Derrick Henry is at least well in this conversation, and we've kind of established that by now. Kalle, you have any more running back thoughts you want to throw out? Any guys you want to throw out before we get into my lineup dilemmas?
Yeah, I just want to say it's been super fun. I got to grow up watching Christian McCaffrey play football, and I had him on my fantasy team in 2018, and that's probably the most fun I've ever had. Was watching a kid I grew up with dominate for me on my fantasy football team. That was really cool.
Yeah, that's pretty insane right there.
The greatest high school athlete I've ever seen in person by a wide margin. And Kalle can certainly testify to that as somebody that got to watch it all the time.
It was crazy. And unfortunately, I wasn't as into football as I am now back then. But it was like watching someone play at a different speed. And it turns out it's still like that in the NFL.
Yeah, I love all of those that you threw out. I will just say Ricky Williams always held a soft spot in my heart.
Me too. Madden 2005. Arian Foster was really good for 2-3 years as well. That's a good point. Great fantasy back. Clinton Portis, love it. Sasha, Chad Johnson, great fantasy player. I had Carson Palmer had like a 7 passing touchdown game, and I think 4 or 5 of them went to Chad Johnson, and I had both of them in my starting lineup, and I broke the record for fantasy points in my league that game. Anyways, I have an ultimate dilemma. I am in a league where you start 2 quarterbacks, and one of my quarterbacks, my main quarterback, is Aaron Rodgers. He's now missing Devontae Adams. A couple other receivers have now been put on. They're playing a good Cardinals defense. Do I play him? Also important, short week.
Yeah.
So I have 3 QBs on the roster. I got Aaron Rodgers going against Arizona. I've got Matt Ryan going against the Panthers, or I've got Teddy Bridgewater going against Washington. And I really hate all 3 of these options, but I got to play 2 of them. And I think I'm gonna go Matt Ryan and Aaron Rodgers. I just don't trust this Denver offense right now. But it also kind of feels like they're due.
Little spoiler, my number 1 defense to stream this week is the Washington football team. So
redemption, huh? It's redemption. Yeah, no. No, Teddy. I was surprised Teddy's not available in more leagues that I'm in, frankly. Also, I love this. Love this shirt. I mean, it's the duality of man, guys. That's a good one. That's a good one.
They're basically all projected to get about 19 points.
You can't bench Aaron Rodgers, and I
think how do you bench it? If he has
Teddy.
a down week, you're like, oh man, I saw this coming from a mile away. Why didn't I switch him in? But if he goes off, then it's just like I got too cute here.
Yeah, you can't bench Aaron Rodgers, and that Panthers lines played really well, but that secondary's beat up. Yeah, I like it better than the football. I don't know. I just wouldn't start Teddy right now. I think the Falcons. Offense.
Yeah, Falcons offense is coming around, and the Broncos offense is not. I mean, we just need to stop doing this to ourselves as Broncos fans. Separate ourselves in fantasy at least, and just stay away. Stay.
And betting, no fan, unless you're fading them. But
emotional bets are not what we do in this business. I have a debate.
Okay.
I need to start 3 of these 4 wide receivers. Keenan Allen against the Patriots, Marvin Jones against the Seahawks, Cortland Sutton against the football team, or Chase Claypool against the beat up Browns. And if you like all of those wide receivers, I could bench Elijah Mitchell.
I wouldn't bench Elijah Mitchell.
I wouldn't.
I would probably bench.
I'm benching Claypool because I think the Bengals defense is sneaky.
Crazy.
I think that pass rush is going to get after Big Ben.
I thought they were playing
I will
the
say
Browns.
he's sneaky in division games. Oh, no, you're right. That's the Browns. You're right.
But still,
so I
sneaky
bench,
pass rush.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, still applies.
I'd probably bench Keenan Allen.
Patriots defense has come together too, but they've been beating up on some bad teams.
Yeah, it's tough because I feel like if Belichick wanted to take away Keenan Allen, he can. I think
Eckler is who he's going to try and take away, though, right?
Eckler and Mike Williams, right? Who's kind of emerged this year as kind of Herbert's favorite guy. So maybe he actually, by design, lets Keenan Allen feast on some shorties.
I'd rather let Keenan Allen get 11 catches for 85 yards than Mike Williams burn me for 120 and 2 touchdowns.
Yeah,
if I'm a defensive guy, Williams is who I'm trying to take away.
The problem is this group is so unreliable except for Keenan Allen to some extent. So I'd almost stay with him.
That's what I mean.
And Marvin Jones against the Seahawks might be safer than Claypool. So then it comes down to Claypool or Sutton. And I don't know. Sutton's kind of been feeling it. And the football team's secondary sucks.
I mean, I got Sutton. Right. I'm playing Sutton this week too. And for me, it was, do I play Cortland Sutton or do I put Khalil Herbert in the flex against the Niners, which is also a matchup that I like a lot.
Yeah.
And I guess if I wanted to, I could bench Cordero Patterson against Carolina. But I kind of like that Matt Ryan-Patterson combo because you get the double points if he gets a passing touchdown. I
agree. I like that stack. And I just wouldn't bench Court right now. His upside's not that high, but his floor, I mean, they have to throw the ball to someone.
Yeah.
And so he just is getting catches right now.
Right, and they're coming from behind every half, so they're going to toss them up to him. That's
what he did last week, just a bunch of garbage time, fourth quarter touches.
Exactly. Okay, great. This is more off the waiver heap, more of a streaming, but I need options at tight end or wide receiver. Kale, did you have one for us?
For streaming options for wide receivers and tight ends?
No. I was looking at my notes.
Dilemma. No, I'm good.
Hinton, Russell Gage, who's now coming back. Hinton, kind of sneaky in that flex. Or Braxton Berrios, who I kind of want to get rid of.
Yeah.
Say that Hinton, Berrios.
I just need one. Hinton, Russell Gage, who's now coming back, or Berrios. Projections would say Gage.
Yeah, go Gage.
Projections would say Gage. I don't know, man.
Hinton's sneaky.
I might be buying into what Hinton's done too much the last couple of weeks, but Atlanta's a little frustrating because they're going to spread the ball out a lot, and I think Ridley, Patterson, and Pitts are higher in the pecking order than Gage is, and Hinton is probably wide receiver 3 right now. I mean, with Jerry Jeudy coming back, it's tough to say too.
Yeah, that is the problem. Jeudy coming back.
So you gotta
probably Gage. Hinton, I think, could sneaky be a guy that gets like 12 points, but Gage is probably the safer pick.
With Hinton, you're almost betting on a touchdown.
Yeah,
which I don't love.
As a trick play, though, you could, he could be throwing one, though. I don't know. We did see him at quarterback, and that was pretty awful. In some of these, in one league, I found Bourne of the Patriots, and that's
a steal
absolutely
at this point.
Phenomenal. He's been a huge pickup for them. He just came off their best game, so if you can get him, and some places you'll find Khalif Raymond as well, who's been a nice little story for the Lions, and I would pick him over the trio we just suggested as well.
Before we get into the streaming options, I got one more question.
Yeah.
Would you go Cortland Sutton against Washington or Julio Jones against Indy?
Julio, I think that Titans offense has figured it out. I really like that Titans offense.
It's figured it out. All right.
Yeah.
God. I can't count on him to give me 4 quarters anymore. Like, even with a clean bill of health, it's been so rough.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. Like, he's on our teams, right? Like, I got Julio in one league. Like, I drafted his ass. I can finally play him. I might as well. So, yeah, it's Julio. I don't know. Sutton's
I just feel like Sutton's got the guaranteed touches unless Denver gets completely shut down, and there is some comfort there. But the counter is I've got Stephon Diggs and Justin Jefferson are my top 2 wide receivers, so this is just kind of like the flex. But I think I'm going to lean Sutton. We like Sutton's value. if I go back and forth too much, it's going to drive me crazy. And all Sunday, I'm going to be like, should have gone it. I'm sticking with the gut.
We've spent all episode talking about Cortland Sutton, so you might as well actually
Exactly.
take the advice that we're giving.
I'm going to be there Sunday, so hopefully he balls out. Honoring the sheriff, Peyton Manning.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Big deal. Streaming options. I've got some quarterbacks to debate, some tight ends, and then we'll get the defense. We'll go quarterback first, then we'll go defense. Big Ben, Carson Wentz, Geno, Jared Goff, Danny Dimes, Trevor Lawrence, Heineke against the Broncos, or Tyrod Taylor.
I'm really high on Jared Goff this week. I think he's throwing for his job. I think he's throwing for his football life. So I just think that he feels like at this point, he's better than people give him credit for. He's probably going to get benched soon for David Blau of all people if he doesn't start turning things around, and he's going to be throwing for his life. So I like that.
Against
I
Philly.
think there's some sneaky value with Wentz there.
Yeah,
the Titans defense has played better of late, but I'm still pretty skeptical of that secondary. They're making plays right now is the thing. They're very timely.
It also depends on the scoring system. Carson Wentz is going to take a lot of sacks, especially against that Tennessee front that's playing really, really well right now. Especially behind Harold Landry. So I don't know. I don't know. Depends. I'd go with Goff. Wentz is a good option. Big Ben's always a good option too.
It's definitely not Big Ben. The Giants play KC. And that's intriguing.
That's what you got to lead with.
The Giants play KC.
Danny Dimes with his feet?
Yeah,
that's absolutely
90 rush yards.
Honestly, Trevor Lawrence against Seattle and Danny Dimes against KC are sneaky plays.
Those are both Danny Dimes against KC with what they do. Are you kidding me?
It's
the worst run defense I've seen in years.
Yeah, they've got some peeps coming back, though. Tony's still out. You definitely don't want Tyrod, though. He's kind of an interesting stash as your backup, maybe. But they're playing the Rams this week, so absolutely not. Darnold could be on this list, but you should be out. Heineke, sneaky playing for his job. Geno, definitely don't mess with that. Big Ben, samesies. So, yeah, it really comes down to guys like Wentz, Goff, Danny Dimes, and T-Law. And, yeah, I think
Broncos coaches might be coaching for their jobs, too, though, as far as that Heineke matchup. Some of the assistants. I don't think Vic's going anywhere yet, but...
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, I guess it's Danny Dimes. But, man, Lawrence intrigues me. And Goff does, too. Wentz, I'm kind of a hater. But you're right, that matchup is nice.
It's more just the matchup than anything. It's a game they got to win. Indy, they're hot a little bit. You know, they kind of have their identity figured out. They're running the football well. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't trust Wentz in almost any scenario. I'd rather roll with Danny Dimes against the terrible Chiefs defense. And I think you're right on Lawrence too. He's been awesome.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good one. And as Kale's dogs regale us,
He agrees, man.
Yeah,
Danny Dimes.
Big Danny Dimes dogs. Let's get into this quick tight end one for you before we go defense. All these guys available: Mo Alley Cox, Ricky Seals-Jones, Austin Hooper. I've got like injuries to guys left and right here. Zach
Ricky
Ertz
Seals-Jones has been great of late. I actually just picked him up and stashed him. I got Mark Andrews and Mike Gesicki, so I didn't really need him, but it's just kind of like a just in case receivers get hurt flex type deal. But he's putting up points. Like it's gotten to a point where it's a legitimate debate between him and Gesicki's been great this year.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's actually, I'm kind of surprised by how good the options are at tight end for some of these.
Especially at this point of the season. Those are all guys that are getting guaranteed touches.
Yeah, 100%. And my guy Conklin's still available in a lot of leagues. So you love that. Lay it on. What you got on the defensive front, Kale?
I
All
need
right,
a
I'll
defense. So throw
run
'em
through
out.
quickly. I really like defenses that are going to be available to stream this weekend. The Panthers benched their starting quarterback last week. You should absolutely pick up the Falcons defense this week.
Man. Oh,
Washington football team. The Broncos haven't scored more than 20 points in weeks. So the Washington
so
football
true.
team, you should pick them up.
Teddy's also throwing picks, which was like supposed to be what he wasn't going to do. So potentially, some big play opportunities there.
Exactly. And then I kind of sneaky like the Eagles against the Lions this week just because they don't have any pass catchers. And even though they're kind of the most boring defense to watch in all of football right now, those would be my three I would go with.
Can I throw out the Seahawks who...
No, you cannot.
They're horrible on defense, but now all of a sudden they're like in these low scoring games because they're just playing Geno ball, just similar to Teddy ball. It's just no offense. I don't know.
We can't simultaneously say Trevor Lawrence is a top streaming quarterback and then Seattle is a top streaming defense, right? Because
well, Kale just did that with one of his picks.
Fair enough. No, you're right though. They played in a couple of low scoring games in a row.
Now they're playing.
You are going against a rookie quarterback, so I mean, as impressive as Lawrence has been, there is the opportunity for turnovers.
I just clicked on this one league to see what other teams I have available. Bengals are available in this.
That's what I wanted to ask you. That's who I tried to pick up. I'm hoping on waivers. They're obviously going against the Jets.
With the Jets coming up, but that might be a decent long-term play. Like their front seven, back seven, they're playing half decent football.
Logan Wilson is really good.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, waiver wires, really it's just monitor the Philly backfield. Jordan Howard, especially in dynasties, I would jump. You never know. May have some long-term effects. Now, Miles Sanders was killing owners, so don't expect much. And Boston Scott, a guy on some people's radars, and we talked about Russell Gage. Those kind of guys returned into action.
Maybe Kenneth Gainwell, but he's been after he had like one good week and he's kind of disappeared.
Yeah, and can you find him on your wire? Because I think Jordan Howard might be more available in some leagues than Gainwell is. But yeah, monitor that. That would kind of be the only note. Thank you, fellas. Thank you all for tuning in and listening. Shouts to Mama Sorbo and the dogs for joining us as well. You love that. Best of luck on your fantasy football, folks.